Hello and good evening, everyone. Candace Stearns here from Michigan Eagle Forum. And ladies, please introduce yourself.
My name is Daniela Davis. I'm the Vice President of Eagle Forum of Michigan.
I'm Emily Bauman, and I am the Secretary of Eagle Forum of Michigan.
And we're so excited to have everyone here and to discuss tonight the Sound of Freedom movie that all of us have seen. And if you haven't seen, we highly, highly recommend that you do so. Not because it's an action-packed thriller. It's actually about a very sobering topic, human trafficking. And tonight we thought we would share not only some information and an overview of the Sound of Freedom and have some open dialogue about it, but also some action steps that we can all take to really help combat human trafficking. So with that being said, let's jump right in. And Daniela, if you can please share with everybody how they can find us in our future events.
Well, we are pleased to inform you that we have a new website.
Yes.
And it is up and running. And please check us out and give us some feedback on that. You can find us on eagleforummichigan.org. Yep. And this has been in the making for a while. And, there's always little, snags, in the beginning. So if you see anything or if you have any, any concerns or recommendations, please let us know. As you know, we alternate between Zoom and in person. And so we are very proud to tell you next month, September, the 27th through the 30th, we're meeting in Washington, D.C., and it's going to be our Eagle Forum Council 51. We have some fabulous speakers. Among them is the real person who the movie that we are discussing tonight is featured. His name is Tim Ballard, and he is going to be speaking on his experiences in the movie and how you can get involved. And so I hope that everybody can come. I know that it's a trip to DC, but it is well worth it. Candace and I traveled to the Council 50 last September, and it was in St. Louis, and it was a very rewarding experience. Okay, so then we have another in Zoom meeting, and that is going to be in October, and it is Title 9.
Correct.
We're going to have some experts in the field speaking to us, and we have an in-house expert, and her name is Tabitha Walter, and she will be talking to us about the latest and greatest news with Title 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then our next in-person will be in Oakland County, and Daniela is working on that as we speak. So
yes, that's going to be a holiday party, kind of what's going on locally in and around Michigan. And so we would really like you to come. That is going to be on November 16th. And yes, it's going to be in Oakland County, and I'm getting space for it now. Please come to that.
Thank you, Daniela.
We might have some election celebrations at that time.
Right.
Who knows?
Yes.
Right. So we want to recognize that not everybody has maybe had an opportunity to see The Sound of Freedom in the movie theaters. And some of you may be very familiar with Father Mike Schmidt. He does a daily reading the Bible in 1 year podcast. Actually, it's really a vlog where he talks not only through an audio Spotify and all the podcast channels, but he also has a YouTube channel where he goes day by day through the Bible and has you read and do some commentary. So he's very popular in the Christian community. He did a quick little movie overview about The Sound of Freedom, gives pretty much the storyline, and then his interpretation or his view on the movie itself. So I thought we would just play that here for a minute. So hopefully you guys can hear that.
Okay, I'm going to do my best with this one. I've wanted to make this video for weeks now. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. Someone had shared with me a screener, what they call, so you get a preview of a movie. They shared the movie Sound of Freedom, starring Jim Caviezel, the true life story about a man named Timothy Ballard, who used to work for Homeland Security, and he would bust pedophiles, essentially, those who would hurt and abuse children. At one point in his life, this true story, at one point in his life, he had busted a number of these individuals. And someone said, how many have you convicted? And there's a big number, a couple hundred. And someone said, well, how many kids have you saved? And he realized that, yes, we need to stop those who are willing to hurt kids, but you have to save these kids too. The statistics are mind-blowing. The millions, there are more slaves right now in the world than there ever have been in the history of humanity. Right now, right? And this is one of the things that this movie, Sound of Freedom, brings up. Again, I'm kind of late to the party because I know that there've been so many reviews, so much commentary on this movie and how important it is. I don't just want to add noise to this whole thing. I want to just, first of all, I do want to encourage you to watch this movie, and I'll say why at the very end of this video. But also just in noticing, the movie depicts this. It's a true life story, right? This millions of people right now, as I'm saying these words, right now, as you were listening to these words, there are millions of people, millions of children even, who are in sex trafficking and child labor. They're children being bred for their organs. It's just children being plucked off the street. And in some of the most difficult footage to watch in this movie is the very beginning and the very end, where they actually show not live footage, but actual footage of children being abducted. And the common thread in so many of these children's lives is that they are poor, they are desperate, they are not protected, and even sometimes they are protected. And the nefarious men who are willing to do, and women who are willing to do this is just horrible. And that's what I want to say, that the movie, the story, shows some of the darkest men you've ever seen, right? Some of the most manipulative, the most willing to use innocence, not just those who want to use innocence sexually, but also those who want to use innocence just for gain, for monetary gain, for more power, for more wealth. It also shows men and women who are willing to use their strength to help others, willing to lay down their lives so others can have life. It depicts this incredible way in which there are some men in this film, in this story, in this real life, who are willing to use everything they have to stop evil and to do good, to rescue kids. So that's the story of Tim Ballard and people who work with him, and Operation Underground Railroad, and the story, of course, those criminals who are perpetrating this. But there's an individual in this story. It's Tim Ballard's wife. She's in the story, but I don't think you can overestimate her role. At one point, Tim Ballard was months away from collecting pension with the U.S. government, but he had this opportunity to go and save some kids. And he was like, well, maybe I can't do this. I'm placing my own children at risk, my family at risk, because I have a sweet pension. It's going to keep us safe, keep us secure. And I'm giving that up in order to go into hell, essentially, risking my life and the future of my family for the lives of these kids. And his wife at first was kind of like, yeah, it's a big question. But then she said she took it to prayer. And at one point she told her husband, she said, I can't imagine standing before my maker one day, standing before God himself, and him saying, you chose comfort and security over being willing to save my children. She said, Tim, you have to. She said, for the safety of my soul, you have to go and you have to rescue these kids. And this is just so powerful. It's so beautiful. I don't even know if they intended on doing this, but it shows the masculine and feminine genius, right? Just that sense of, here's this man who has so many skills, so much strength, so much capacity to do good, but he needed the feminine genius, right? He needed the feminine genius to say, you must go. There's something so powerful about when men and women work together like this. I mean, it's the reason why. What did God say? It's not good for the man to be alone. Not only do we need others in general, but also husbands and wives need each other. That the masculine genius and the feminine genius, we need each other. It's so much of our lives are spent in competition, right? Just like who can dominate the other person. But it's so powerful, and yet I don't even know if they intended on doing this. But the masculine strength, genius, I guess you could say, of Tim Ballard and the people who works with him, it's only made possible because of the feminine genius of his bride. That's so powerful. You know, I want to ask you to go watch this movie. It's in times difficult to watch, but not difficult to watch in the sense of being graphic, right? And it's not just that it's not a documentary. It's not preaching at you. Again, one of the things you can count on about this movie is that it's an actual movie. It's a kind of a thriller. It's kind of it's a will they save them? Will they not save them? It's a good story. And the fact that it's a true story is even, you know, heightens it. And the fact that it's talking about some things that are necessary for us to confront, right? Necessary for us to pay attention to is even more important. I can't emphasize enough how you should go see this movie. Not only to support it, but it's a good movie, and we need to put this in front of us. At the end of the movie, in the middle of the credits, Jim Caviezel comes on screen as Jim Caviezel, not as Tim Ballard, and he basically gives some statistics, and he tells us, okay, here's the state of things, and that things can change through the power of story. In fact, I remember hearing him or Tim Ballard talk about Harriet Beecher Stowe. If you remember the story during the Civil War, here's Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, and she exposed the reality of what life was like living as a slave on a plantation in the United States of America. Like the reality that not just like, oh, there's some people working in a field, but no, here is the devastating reality of slavery. She wrote this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. At one point, apparently Abraham Lincoln met with her, and he said, so you're the little woman who wrote that book that caused this great big war. He realized it was the power of story that galvanized the country to say this has to stop. That's why I think this is such an important movie. And that's why I think that this movie is run up against so much opposition. He said, Jim Caviezel says at the end of it, he says, I read somewhere, you know, I've watched so many interviews with these people, Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel, it's like crazy. But he said that, you know, made this movie 5 years ago, and different people wouldn't pick it up. They wouldn't distribute it. And you wonder, maybe it's because you're just business is business. But maybe it's because this is a message, this is a story that some people don't want you to know, they don't want you to hear it. They know the power of story, and they know that this story could have the potential to start something that could change our world. This could be, you're the little woman who wrote that book that caused this great big war that led to eradication of slavery here in the United States of America, which was absolutely necessary, horrible. This could be, in fact, Tim Ballard's wife. It could be, so you're the little lady who encouraged your husband to do this thing that caused the end of the modern sex trafficking, modern labor trafficking, modern organ trafficking, modern human trafficking. I don't want to say epidemic, but when there's more slaves in the world right now than there ever have been, that's pretty massive. So check out this movie. I do not think it'll be a waste of your time. And I do not think it'll be a waste of your money. And I think it just could be the thing that some of us might need, like Tim Ballard's wife, that encouragement to say, okay, now it's time to do something. It's time to end this however we can. Anyways, please pray for those kids tonight who at this very moment, pray for them.
Powerful, right, ladies?
Almost Center Presents. My name is Father Mike.
Oh, geez. Hold on a second.
Yeah, so going again. That's very powerful.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's why we wanted to hold this particular webinar in the month of August, because it came out in July, and all three of us have seen the movie, and we just felt that it was such a powerful message that really aligns so well with everything that we do with Eagle Forum of Michigan, Eagle Forum in general. All of us are pro-family, pro-conservative, fighting the good fight on a lot of these really tough issues. And so we wanted to share some statistics about human trafficking, because the message of the story is to put it front and center, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it happens here in our neighborhoods, and it's happening all around us. And so as you can see here on the statistics sheet here, that human trafficking can be a couple of different things. Obviously, it can be the sex slave trade that went on in the movie, but it also can be the human trafficking and slavery of labor, which is a huge, issue that we have in the United States. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we have both labor, forced labor, forced marriage issues, sex trafficking with children going on. And as more, thousands and thousands of more people pour in through our open borders that we have going on right now, a lot of it now has turned to the trafficking and the trading of humans over the border, because the human trafficking issue is more profitable than drugs or guns or anything else. And that's because kids can be traded 5 or 6 times a day for sexual relations and things of that nature. And these are really, really hard topics to confront and talk about. Some numbers show 40 million victims are trapped in modern day slavery. Other numbers say it's as high as 50 million worldwide. There are 8 billion people in the world, but 1 in 4 victims of this 40 million victimization is slavery are children. And they're not always immigrants. They're foster kids. They're kids, everyday kids that you may even know. And so I think that's the thing that a lot of Americans don't realize, and we wanted to talk about tonight. So some of the additional statistics here on the board, I'm just going to kind of peruse through. If you want copies of the PowerPoint, I'll be happy to get this to you. But I had already mentioned that about 16 million of them are forced labor issues. Children as young as 10 or 13 are posing as 18-year-olds and working 50, 60-hour jobs in slaughterhouses. You may or may not have seen reports about some of these meat processing centers recently being busted for child labor practices and things of that nature. But then, of course, the movie itself really spotlights the problem of sex trafficking. The movie is set outside of the United States, but this sex trafficking is occurring here in the United States. And unfortunately, the U.S. happens to be number 3 in destinations for pedophiles to actually travel here from all over, not just locally, unfortunately, for the sex trafficking market. And so when it comes to those kinds of things, some of the other issues can be forced marriages, where a 12 or 11-year-old or 13-year-old is forced to marry a 30 or 40-year-old man. That kind of thing is happening. And tonight we're going to talk about some real issues that we can do and steps we can take to lobby our states, in Michigan, for example, to help close some of these loopholes or issues that are potentially here. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then one other thing that I think a lot of people also don't realize in the United States is organ harvesting. Any of you that subscribe to Epic Times may or may not know that the gentleman who started that news media is from China, and he was part of the persecuted religious group that has been encamped and enslaved in China because of their religious beliefs. And it's very common to actually breed people for organs and that kind of thing, which is just abhorrent. It's abhorrent. It's like we don't have this going on, or we don't see this here in the United States, but it is going on. It's going on, you know, right under our noses. And people either don't want to see it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to know about it. But the more we bring it to the forefront, I think the more people know about it, things can then be done about it. So where's human trafficking occurring? I think I touched on a couple of these things. And how can you identify human trafficking? You know, it's not just like you see in the movie Sound of Freedom, where somebody, you know, knocks on the parent's door and says, hey, your daughter is going to be a famous model. Let me take her for the day and, you know, get her pictures and prep her, kind of thing. It's also happening, you know, in families, unfortunately. And there's red flags that you can, you know, look for, you know, has the child stopped attending school, for example. So if you're a teacher or you're in one of these, you know, organizations like schools, or you drive a bus or something like that, if all of a sudden a kid isn't going to school anymore, that could potentially be a sign of trafficking behavior, you know, abuse, all of these different kinds of things. And, you know, you have to look for this stuff. But if you're interested in learning more about some of the signs, there's actual programs and classes that you can take to help identify this and be more aware of it. And then some of the people that are going to be watching this or on the call, you know, they have kids themselves, and they're trying to figure out how they can keep their own children safe from potentially sexual predators. You know, back in the day, we used to be afraid of the white van and always having our kids play outside because, you know, you thought somebody in a white van was going to pull up at the park and nab your kid. Well, it's not the white van anymore, guys. It's the internet. And the internet is the white van. And if you don't know how to use the internet and you don't know all the stuff on the internet, you're not going to be able to protect your children from it. And I know what I'm about to say is a pretty harsh statement, but if you aren't watching and putting all kinds of parental controls on the computer in your home, in the device in your kid's hand, it's not a question of if something's going to happen or if your kid's going to be approached. It's when. Because they're using chat apps like Discord and chatting through games and things that seem very, very safe. Maybe some Disney, you know, app where they get to redesign the house and put you know, clothes on the people and this kind of stuff, even as young as, you know, age 5 and 6. Disney apps, right? That's where these sexual predators in these white van people are living right now. They're all on these apps. They get in them. They call themselves, you know, Princess, Diana or whatever, and they act as a motherly figure, and they they build this rapport and relationship with your children, all because they want to get to know where they live. They want to get to know about them. They ask them questions about how mean the mom's being to them and they don't understand you and all of this kind of stuff. So it's really important for you to jump in and learn about safety guides and things like that for apps. And, Tim Ballard's organization, ourrescue.org, has some talking points and things like that. And again, feel free to reach out to us. And when I'm sending out the links for the webinar, I'm going to include a lot of these resources in there too, so you can download them. But I just wanted to bring it up because, again, I think a lot of us, especially if you're Gen X or older, you have this misconception that it's a white van and you want to go with your grandkids or your kids to the park. And that's really not the way that it's being done in the 21st century. So how can we help the kids? What can we do? A lot of us have seen the movie now, and it's really impacted us. The story hit our hearts, and we want to know what type of action steps and things that we can do to really make change and have a slave-free world. And so one of the key things that Eagle Forum really works hard on are legislative issues, stateside and on the federal side. And the first thing you need to do is learn about what laws are in place that need to be addressed or changed in our state, specific to child sexual abuse, age of marriage, neglect, that kind of thing. So, I put some information in here about the ability to pull reports and see where your state is. And then I also have some information here specifically about Michigan, because we're Michigan Eagle Forum. And I was going to have Emily talk a little bit about her experience in her collegiate classes, specific to the age of consent, age of marriage, in Michigan's age of majority.
Thank you, Candace. I was just going to add that what just recently, just so people are aware, there is an annual report that's put out by our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, called the Trafficking in Persons Report. It literally just came out in June 15th, and he had a presentation in July. So I'd encourage people to take a look at that, because some of these statistics are in there. And what that report talks about is the fact that there are minimum standards that the United States, the United Nations are keeping track of. These other countries that are supposed to be watching and actually working on to reduce human trafficking. There are about 21 countries who aren't meeting those minimum standards, and 3 territories. And that's really scary that they're not doing anything for this. And I think that's an important thing to be looking at, is who's actually working on this. And they have 3 tiers. They do currently have the United States in tier 1 as far as a country that's doing something. I think what's missing for me in that is, okay, so what result? You might be doing these minimum standards, but why are they minimum? I think we need maximum. And as I was doing some of that research for my class, I came onto the age of consent that Candace is talking about here, because that's really interesting. Because when you think about age of consent, they don't actually look at things after a certain age. They think that it's okay. And it is very different across the country as far as the age of consent. I actually thought the age of majority for everything was 18. But when you actually start looking at the fact that I think for me, the issue here is we know that the brain does not actually develop until 25. So when you're talking about an age of majority or age of consent, and there's 16 and things like that in many of these states, and even like what Candace mentioned out, is that in Michigan, any child can be married at any age if parental gives consent, if a parent gives consent. Well, with foster parents and others, and I'm not saying they're doing this, but at the same time, there is that is one of the areas that they say that the foster system is probably one of the biggest areas that we are not looking at when it comes to some of these problems. And I know even in my research, there's also the idea that the kids are being put out for commercial sex, but they're brought home at night. So these are not kids, this movie did a great job, but that's not what's happened. That's not the majority, I don't think, of what's happening in our own backyards. And so we do have to be looking at this stuff and seeing that. And there has been in the past, there's not a lot right now, but there are bills in some states to try to lower the age of consent. That's the scarier part for me. There are some states that actually want to raise it, but to be like between 20 and 25, but more often than not, you see people, they're wanting to lower it. And I think that's something we need to be looking at, and whether or not we actually take the initiative to try to get these bills out there and say, okay, let's get the bills out there that raise it, to get the discussion going. But we definitely need to be looking at some of these sleeper bills coming through that are trying to lower the age of consent, that actually would make it legal for a child to be lost, so to speak, in a system that we don't even have a handle on.
Not to mention our foster community, because if it's not just the age of consent, Emily, it's also emancipation.
Yeah. Yes.
And
yes.
So on the screen, you don't see that mentioned anywhere. But if you're a foster child and they emancipate you at 16, or they convince you that you should apply to, because all of these reasons, right? You're free to do on your own and get a job and quit school and do whatever you want, however it's going to be laid out to this young person, right? It's going to be the same issue. Your pimp or your madam, let's just use that term, whoever the handler is that's convincing these young kids that are 13, 14, 15 years old.
And younger.
Right.
And the argument is that they don't have anybody to watch all the cases and to really look at some of these things. And I guess an interesting statistic that was given to me, and I don't have any resource on this, it was just shared with me, so I don't know how true it is, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, is that if one family out of every single church in Michigan adopted one child, we would not have a foster system in Michigan. There would be no children without a home. That's how many churches we have, and only one family from every single church, if they adopted someone, we actually would not have that. Now, I have no reference for that statistic. That was shared with me by somebody who had done, I think, had done some research, but it's something to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks for contributing.
Thank you,
that information.
Emily.
Yeah. And so I wanted to just open it up. I do have a Sound of Freedom special message, because we all did see the movie. So now I wanted to transition before we play the actual credits from the movie. Jim, the actor, does have an end. He does a little cameo at the end, and gives us all an action item to do. So I will play that before we end. But before we do that, I just thought it would be good to get those of us on the call your feedback about the movie and anything that you might want to contribute. So Daniela, did you want to share first?
Sure. Of course, I was looking at it from the eyes of someone in the United States. I was looking at the cultural differences. When the father, allowed his children to go into a hotel room, not knowing who the woman was, even though, I think that they had met just that one time. And when she said, come back at 7 p.m., and he left them, I was thinking, you left your children with a stranger, and you're going to come back at 7. We would never do that. I'm sure none of us would do that. But you see, that's done in so many different places, different countries and cultures. And so I thought to myself, even the best of us, even in the United States, even in the best of us who who are who have rules for our families, who have loving families. We don't know the next door neighbor if something is going on. And things are going on in our neighborhoods, in our cities. It's very high in Michigan. And it just, so I went from Colombia and Honduras back to Michigan. At the end of the movie, I thought to myself, I want to be an advocate for those who know less, do less, and are harmed. I just had made a resolve and a kind of a commitment to God that I am going to be an advocate in some way.
Yeah, I think that story, I've cried several times during the movie because it just is so, as a mom, right? It's just so heart-wrenching to even think. And when the father was like, you have a family. There's a part in the movie where the dad gets the son back, but the daughter isn't back. And it wasn't said like, well, you should be happy you have one of them back. It wasn't said, but it kind of was like implied, like, aren't you going to try and save my daughter too? Aren't you going to try and find her too? It was kind of like an implied thing. And I think that's, that really hit my heart because, even though you have more than one child, like I have two boys, right? If something happened to either of them, it would be devastating, but to get one back and not the other, it's like you still are in that same state of mind, right? And I think that's what really pushed the character in the movie, right? And Tim Ballard in real life to be like, no, whatever it takes, I got to get his sister back. I got to get his daughter back. Like, until I find out she's dead otherwise, I got to keep looking for her.
And he gave up his, the job, the benefits, and he did everything. He sold out for this whole purpose, which of course made me think about, and not that this is a religious discussion, but it reminded me of Jesus and how he would leave everyone to go after that one lost sheep.
Right. Yeah. That's so beautifully put. Yes. Yeah. Emily, did you have any highlights or things that really touched you during the movie?
Specifically, I think I had a compelling, again, not to bring it, but at the end of it, I was compelled. I wanted to just fall on my knees and pray at the end of it. So I will say that was there. I think it's interesting what Daniela said, because I've had that feeling in my life with my children, where I've been in a situation where, in fact, where I think that there was an attempt to remove me out. I'm like, no, I'm not letting my children go alone. So, and I think, and even, I will say, even, and again, another subject, but the idea that at 12, doctors want to be with children alone in the medical room. And I'm like, no, that doesn't happen. So there's too much in our environment. What got me really think about this is that how many things are in our society,
right,
with the intention to separate parents from children. And that's really what hit me home about this, is that, why was that father so easily let go? Because there's so many things in our society that are trying to separate parents and children, and to reduce that age that children think that they can be doing things alone, or that parents should be okay letting their children do this or do that without them. And I think that there's this, boundary that we've reduced. And when I think about being an advocate and doing help and things like that, it's like, okay, there's a societal message that we need to make sure of how to stop this, because it isn't happening in other countries. It is huge in our own country. A couple of years ago, I read about the story of a girl in Birmingham. When she was a teen in Birmingham, what was going on. And it's like, we really need to start that conversation and say, what needs to be done? What do our police know? And that's what I'm at. Like, what do people know that are actually in this? What do our local police know? What have they seen? And how can we help? How can we be better advocates or better message bringers to change this? Because it seems so hidden, which is different than the old, like slavery of the old days. That wasn't hidden. Everyone knew who had the slaves, and they knew how many slaves people had. But this is not that.
Well, I think that's a good point. And I got to meet Marisol Nichols, who assists Tim Ballard. She's a famous actress. A lot of, younger people know her well because she came up through Disney and all, on some hit shows and things of that nature. And she met Tim Ballard and became deputized as an FBI agent and actually has assisted him in the Dominican Republic to rescue kids in these horrific situations. And what was surprising to me, because she did some busts in California in her home state first before she started doing some international rescuing, and she brought up the issue that our porn industry, not only for men but women as well, have really been feeding a lot of this, unfortunately, because it's like an addiction. And once you start going down the slippery slope of watching porn, it becomes harder and harder, and younger people, and then all of a sudden that's how the United States becomes, number 3 in sexual trafficking destinations for pedophiles. So and you can talk with local people who local police and sheriffs, but the problem is if family and other people protect these people and won't prosecute, it's hard. You got to catch them in the act. You got to have these sting operations. You've got to do this nefarious stuff and get in the trenches to try to catch this whole thing that's going on. And she shared from the stage, because I was at a conference and that's when I met her. She shared from the stage how mentally challenging it is, because, she's like, I've used every bit of my acting skills to play the part. And she said, it's the hardest acting job I ever have done, because this is just some sick stuff that goes on, and God bless people in law enforcement that are out there doing this, because it's just got to wear on you, so to that point. Well, we are almost at the top of the hour. This hour seemed to fly right by. So I'm going to just wrap up if we don't have any other questions or no one else wants to chime in. And I'll go ahead and play the final message from the movie. And we ask if you have additional information, resources, document stuff that you want, please reach out to us. Support Michigan Eagle Forum, because we'll continue to bring solid information like this each and every month, whether it's at the in-person meetings or through our webinars. So
thank you all for coming out and watching this movie. I'm guessing some of you are feeling sad, maybe overwhelmed, or even a sense of fear, which is understandable. But living in fear isn't how we solve this problem. It's living in hope. It's believing that we can make a difference, because we can. But I want to make one thing clear. This movie you just watched isn't about me or Tim Ballard. It's about those kids. This film was actually made 5 years ago. It wasn't released till now, with every roadblock that you can imagine being tossed in the way. And the names you see here on the screen took a stand, and they made sure this story could be shown to all of you. And now all of you have the opportunity to continue telling this story. We don't have big studio money to market this movie, but we have you. and the baton has now been passed to you. You are the storytellers that can get people to come see this film in theaters. Together, we have a chance to make these two kids and the countless children that they represent the most powerful people in the world by telling their story in a way only the cinema can do. For a couple of months, while Sound of Freedom is in theaters, these kids can be more powerful than the cartel kingpins or presidents or congressmen or even tech billionaires. We believe this movie has the power to be a huge step forward toward ending child trafficking, but it will only have that effect if millions of people see it. We don't want finances to be the reason someone doesn't see this movie, so Angel Studios boldly has set up a pay it forward program where you can pay for someone else's ticket who might not otherwise see it. If you're able, we invite you to pay it forward by buying a ticket for someone else, or if your budget is tight, share the already available free tickets with as many friends as you can. Join us and millions of others as we ring Sound of Freedom and hope throughout the world. And just remember this, God's children are not for sale.
So that's when I was losing it in the movie.
Yeah, that's tough stuff it's just tough to understand how this stuff, happens in our kind of sheltered world. But yeah, it's just, I get one of my friends sent me a video by Tim Tebow. I guess he has had an organization fighting against, and I don't know what his politics are, I have no idea, but he has an organization and that he's been involved with and, ran, I think, for I don't know how many years, but he's been fighting this fight for a long time. And the video, seeing this big muscular guy, break down in tears throughout this video. And he tells a story about, he says, some cases get to you more than others. And he told a story about this young girl that was like, begging in the streets, and her mother was unhappy with her because she didn't bring home enough. She wasn't collecting enough money, begging. And so the mother boiled her eye, he said, like, I don't know what, I guess, like, burned her eye or whatever, so that she would look more pitiful, so that she could collect more money. And then ultimately her mother ended up selling her and into trafficking. But it's like some of these horrific stories, and just like slavery, a lot of times it's the families themselves selling them into slavery. It's not just, ignorance on the parent side. Sometimes, a lot of times, they sell their own children because
Right.
they're so desperate. And maybe some parents think that they'll have a better life that way. I don't know. They'll at least get to eat or something. I don't know what their thought process is, but it just is appalling that the human condition sometimes is appalling to me. I just can't even wrap my head around like any parent that would be desperate enough to do that, because I can't imagine any circumstance that would make me want to sell my own child,
Right.
But
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Diana.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's a real, I'll send, Danielle, if I can find that video again, the Tim Tebow one, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And again, I don't know if what his politics are, but I know he's dedicated a lot of time and money to fight this fight.
And you're talking about Tim Tebow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Does
think
anyone
he sent it.
know?
I'm going to look, but if you can resend it, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we get it, we'll send it out in the email for the replay too. And I just pulled up, Emily had put in the chat the report, the 2023 trafficking in-person report. So we'll send this link to that you can, look at and read more into. And
Wow, good.
Yeah,
That looks very good.
yeah. So we'll just go ahead and get that out. And with that, I'm gonna also, let's see if I can get back to that one page, Daniela, where we.
By the way, every year that goes by and my grandkids get older, I'm like, thank you. They made it another year without, you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like you don't want to grow up too fast, but you're like thankful that like they're getting through high school and middle. I have the last grandkid in middle school, and it's like, you just kind of want them to grow up so that this isn't an issue. But
Right,
Yeah, we are very concerned with our future generations.
right.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we're doing this.
Right. Yeah, so again, this is just the information about future events, and we really appreciate everyone, tuning in to this particular topic, because we know it's a hard topic, but it has to be shared, and it's the best way to actually get something done. So,
And if you have any topics, and I know that we have to wind up pretty soon in 4 minutes, but anyone who's listening to this recording, if you have any ideas for future topics, please let us know. Let us know on our website, in the comments.